probably wasn't taking no more than what those baseball players were taking.
Ronnie, I'm pretty sure you did in fact take more than the baseball players took. Coach Greg and Ronnie Coleman comes clean on what he took and others were taking back in the 90s during the Olympia days. Was it as much as we thought? We're going to look and find out. He was interviewed by none other than Joe Rogan, and we're going to watch. What does he admit to? What was it like back then? And are bodybuilders all using massive amounts? Well, let's hear it from the horse's mouth himself.
You know, your tests, D-ball, it's just basic stuff. They made us do it legally. So, you know, you had to go to the doctor.
And you would get prescriptions for steroids?
Yeah.
Basic stuff, test, and D-ball. Not sure if that's quite exactly coming clean, but listen. If the DEA was investigating him back in the 90s and they had to have prescriptions from doctors, he's not going to sit on the Joe Rogan show and say, yeah, I took Tren, that wasn't given by my doctor, but I took stuff from the doctor and I took other stuff in secret because I didn't want them to find out and put me in prison. So I don't believe he's being totally honest here. I think he's admitting to some things to get people to say, oh, well, that makes sense. There is no way that Ronnie Coleman was only using testosterone and D-ball or only using doctor-prescribed HRT medications. Yeah, you can actually get steroid prescriptions from doctors. Currently, you could get testosterone, you could get Anavar, depending on the country, and you can get lots of stuff. Now, the laws, they do change over time, and doctors have to be able to back up the doses they're giving. They can't just say, here's 1,500 milligrams of test and 10 IUs of GH. And depending on the countries you're in, some doctors are allowed to prescribe different steroids than other countries. In Canada, for example, I can't get Proviron, but in other countries you can. And there's no doctor that's going to prescribe me Anavar or Deca where I'm from, but in the United States it's very common.
Shouldn't you be out there catching people selling meth?
Yeah,
Why are you going after bodybuilders who are also cops? That seems ridiculous.
Because they had kids out there that were taking it and committing suicide.
I remember back in the day, a few teenagers committed suicide who were taking steroids. So it's very easy to point the finger and say, well, it's probably because of the steroids that we're doing. That's what caused suicide. But let's examine how many teens are actually using steroids. It's about 5% of males as a teenager will have used steroids, 1 in 20. Females about half as much as that. In the United States, that adds up to about 500,000. 500,000 teenagers have used steroids. You don't believe me? You think it's shocking? It's such a big number? But it's true. 500,000 teenagers. So what are the odds that a few of them are going to commit suicide? Let's say 1 in 10,000 teens commit suicide. That would be 50 people who are using steroids who committed suicide. And if you're a parent, friend, family, relative, and you find out that your son or daughter committed suicide, and you knew that they took steroids, who are you going to point the finger at? The steroids or something else? Very easy to point the finger at something they were doing. Was it only steroids that were doing? Were they using recreational drugs? Were they depressed? Were they suicidal before they even started to take steroids? So it's very easy to say, oh, I blame steroids, when in fact it could very well be something else. It could be a coincidence that they were taking steroids and suicidal. Not saying that you can't get depressed from going off steroids, but for many people, taking steroids actually makes them less depressed. A lot of people who are depressed and go to the doctor will be given something like Prozac, when in fact they could be given something like HRT testosterone, and it makes them feel better. Decrease suicide rates. I'm not making this shit up. It actually happens. I do know people who've gone to the doctor depressed, taken HRT, and felt better. Not depressed. So you can't just say suicides are happening because people are taking steroids. I just don't think that's a fair comparison.
They were committing suicide because they were getting depressed from the steroids coming off of it?
Coming off of it.
Compare how many more people drink alcohol. A lot of people drink alcohol. And the day after, and you're hungover, maybe you feel bad, depressed. Why are you drinking alcohol in the first place? Is it because you're depressed? Are you trying to drown your sorrows? Who knows? We don't really know.
So the DEA would come to you and you would just say, hey, here's my prescriptions.
Yeah.
And they would go, all right.
Yeah.
How did they know where it was?
You told them.
Oh, okay.
So the DEA's knocking on your door. Hey, what steroids are you taking? Because you're just too jacked. Well, I'm going to show them my stash that the doctor gave me. See this prescription? I'm on testosterone, Deca, Anavar, all legal. I'm not going to show them the trend and all the other shit I'm taking because I'm not a freaking moron. So if the DA's knocking at your door, checking to see if you have steroids there, you're going to show them what's legal. You're not going to show them your stash of illegal steroids that you've got hidden somewhere else. Whether it's in the backyard, in the basement, in the woods, at a friend's house, people are not complete morons.
It's not really possible to be that big without it.
Without it, no. Another thing you got to have, too, is genetics. And probably like 1% that could get as big as I got.
Imagine how much he's downplaying this. Ronnie Coleman saying only about 1% of the population could get as big as me. It's 1 in a billion. 1% as big as Ronnie Coleman. He's the biggest bodybuilder it's ever seen on stage. For his height to weight, the most amount of muscle per square inch, Ronnie Coleman. 1%. 1% of people can't even get as big as a natural Ronnie Coleman. Ronnie Coleman natural, as he's explaining here, has amazing genetics. You think baseball players can just take steroids and look like Ronnie Coleman? They couldn't get as big as Ronnie was natural while taking every steroid in the world. It really comes down to your genetics. Some people are just made to get bigger than others. If you have amazing genetics and you take a shit ton of drugs, you're going to get huge.
Did you, while you were doing things, did you get frequent blood tests? And
Every 3 to 4 months.
And Ronnie Coleman saying he got his blood work done every 3 to 4 months because he did in fact care about his health. He is in fact in his 50s, and although he's had several injuries, he has good health on the inside. His organs, heart, liver, kidneys, those things, they're all okay. But he does say, I didn't take massive amounts of steroids. And frankly, I do believe that he probably didn't take as much as most people would think. I don't think he took low doses. I don't think he took moderate doses. I do think he took high doses, but I don't think he took higher doses than most people take right now.
And people think you're taking like tons of stuff. I wasn't taking tons of stuff. I probably wasn't taking no more than what those baseball players were taking.
Ronnie, I'm pretty sure you did in fact take more than the baseball players took. If you took a random sample of baseball players versus professional bodybuilders and compared what they're taking, without question, the baseball players are taking way less.
If I'd been taking massive amounts of stuff, I don't think I'd still be here. I don't think I'd be as healthy as I am now.
Right.
It's not an exact correlation between how many steroids you take and how much size you get. To a point, yes. You take a little bit, you get some muscle. A little bit more muscle. But there comes a point where if you take more, you actually will lose muscle. If you take 3 grams of gear a week and up it to 4, maybe you get more gains. But if you take 30 grams of gear, you don't keep making gains. If you up your trend dose so high that you can never get to sleep, you're not going to grow because you're not sleeping. In the same way, if you're a marathon runner and you run 3 hours a day, maybe you'll get faster if you run 4. But if you run 19 hours a day, you're going to get slower because you can't go to sleep and you can't recover. There becomes a point where doing more doesn't allow any more benefit. Same applies to PD use. It helps to take more, but it's the law of diminished returns. And eventually, taking a little bit more literally will make you worse.
Now, when you would get off for that 3-month period, would you cycle off of everything?
Cold turkey.
And what did you feel like over those 3 months?
Normal.
Really?
Normal. Didn't bother me a bit.
And so Ronnie Coleman says when he went off cycle, he went off cycle. He didn't blast and cruise. He blasted and then came off. And do I believe him? Yes. He said, how did you feel when you came off? Not bad. I felt pretty good. And truth be told, he would only go off for about 12 weeks. I've done the same thing, taken drugs and in the off season, went off. And how did I feel? I felt great because I wasn't dieting anymore. I felt better off steroids when I wasn't dieting than I felt on steroids while I was dieting. And let's be real. He's only off for 12 weeks. It's not like those drugs are out of his system right away. Just because you stop cold turkey doesn't mean the drugs are out of your system. If you're on long esters, it's a month later, 6 weeks later, you can still feel some of that in your body. It's not like they're totally out of your system. But as the weeks go by, when you start getting into weeks 12, 13, and 14, and so on, that's when you really start noticing that you're really off. So when I went off cycle, after about 3 months, it felt a lot worse than it did a month after. Month after felt fantastic. 2-3 months later, that's when it really starts to be noticeable.
So a lot of guys, after they're done competing, then they have to get on testosterone replacement therapy because the endocrine system's kind of messed up.
Exactly.
Did you have to do that as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And after he quit bodybuilding, HRT, just like me. So it's not like he stopped cold turkey and never took anything. He's literally on HRT, doctor prescribed, totally legal.
You know,
Cold turkey, I stopped everything. One day, I'd be taking, a bunch of stuff. Next day, nothing.
And notice that. One day I took a bunch of stuff, and the next day, nothing. A bunch of stuff doesn't sound like the same amount as a baseball player. I don't think baseball players are taking a bunch of stuff. He didn't say a couple things, then I stopped. Didn't say, I just took test and D-ball and stopped. A bunch of stuff, plural, multiple things. So obviously taking more than he's letting us believe.
then after 3 months, then you would slowly ramp back up.
Slowly ran back up.
So what it sounds like to me is Ronnie Coleman, after winning the Olympia, would take a 3-month break and then go on for 9 months, slowly ramping up to higher doses as the Olympia approaches.
Or some creatine or some this or that. I mean, all that stuff does something.
It helps you out a little bit.
But it's not going to get you.
It's not going to get you 330 pounds with 3% body fat.
No.
Notice he said 3% body fat, not 0.33. Ronnie Coleman, he knows he wasn't really 0.33. Of course, somebody said he was, and he just reported what they said, but he doesn't actually believe it. But I do believe he was close to 3% body fat.
No, it's definitely not going to do that.
Was that something that you were allowed to talk about while you were competing?
Yeah. Had no reason to hide it.
I didn't have a reason to hide it. He was a police officer, and using steroids was illegal. It would be like saying I didn't have a reason to hide the fact that I was taking recreational drugs. If it's illegal, then the reason to hide it is it's illegal. Doesn't that make sense? You're literally a police officer. Your job is to catch criminals taking these drugs, and you're taking them. Of course, he's not just going to openly admit it to everybody.
But there were some guys that would just say, well, the way to win is to take way more than everybody else.
Yeah.
And see what your body could tolerate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The more you take, the better you're going to be.
And frankly, that is true to a point. I just went over that. It is true to a point. The more you take, the better you're going to be up to a certain point, and then it's going to make you worse. And is more going to make you win? Probably. It's not bullshit. The more you take, the more likely you're going to win up to a point. But of course, it comes with a cost being your health or your life.
He died before he was 30.
Some people, they do it the wrong way.
Yeah.
I didn't start taking anything till I was 30.
So if you're thinking it's impossible to build that kind of muscle when you're natural, it's not true. Ronnie Coleman, a prime example of this. However, he's not going to win the Olympia natural. There's only so big you can get. And to compete against the best in the world who are also taking PDs, he had to take it. If Ronnie Coleman could have won natural, he would have done it. I did the same thing. I competed natural for a long time. Did the best I could do, couldn't get any better, and like Ronnie Coleman, waited till I was older to take them. Nowadays, most people, they don't wait that long. 5% of teenage boys on steroids. Teenagers, 5%. And that's steroids. Think of how many more are taking PDs such as SARMs. Even more than the 5%. So those of you who are thinking, oh, it's only people in their 20s, rare, only every now and then does a teenager take steroids. Complete nonsense. In fact, I would argue that most people who take steroids start as a teenager. I don't even know if there's more in their 20s who start versus 19.
Something somebody suggested to you?
Yeah. Guy by the name of Flex Wheeler.
Oh, okay.
My best friend in the world.
And so it was literally Flex Wheeler, professional bodybuilder, the guy that told Ronnie Coleman, you should start taking stuff because you're pretty good. He said he got as high as 3rd place natural, but with steroids, best in the world multiple times.
How much of a night and day difference was it once you started taking stuff?
As far as the conditioning,
And so he says, what difference did steroids make? Mostly his conditioning. He was able to get a lot leaner. So when you're on steroids, you can diet harder and you can maintain more muscle. So it allowed him to get even more shredded. He said he didn't get a lot stronger. And I do believe that because while dieting and severely restricting calories, even though you're on PDs, you're not really that strong. I've literally done this myself. I've competed in powerlifting competitions while dieting and lifted less than when I was natural. So although I was bigger, I weighed more, I was quite literally stronger when I was natural than I was when I was dieting on PEDs. Hopefully that shed a little bit of light on what Ronnie Coleman took back in the 90s Ending it here. GregDoucette.com for coaching. Greg Doucette IB Pro. Please watch one of the Bloops, Harder Than Last Time supplements. Also cookbooks, training books, coaching plans by me and my team. Try and get those if you're trying to lose weight. Click the bell button, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and until next time, I'm out.